My family didn't even realize I had moved out 10 months ago. Then one day my dad called and said, "Come to your brother's wedding. We need to look perfect." I refused. He threatened to cut me out of his will. I answered with one sentence, and he went completely silent. Okay, so I need to tell you something first before I get into this, because I feel like if I just start with the phone call, you're going to think I'm the villain. You're going to think I'm some bitter, dramatic person who blew up her family over nothing. And I get it. I would think that too if I didn't know the full story. So let me give you the full story. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I am the middle child in a family of 3 kids. And if you know anything about being the middle child, you already understand about 40% of what I'm about to tell you. The other 60% is specific to my family, and it is something else. My older brother Ryan was the golden child. I don't mean that in the dramatic, jealous sibling way. I mean it literally. My parents turned toward Ryan the way plants turn toward sunlight. He was the athlete. He was the one my dad drove 4 hours each way to watch play in tournaments. He was the one my mom bragged about at church to anyone who stood still long enough. When Ryan failed, it was a temporary setback. When Ryan messed up, it was a learning opportunity. When Ryan needed something, the family reorganized around the need. When I needed something, I was told to figure it out. That's not me being dramatic. That's just a fact I learned early and absorbed so deeply it stopped feeling unfair and just started feeling like physics, like gravity, just the way things were. And me, I became useful. That was my role. I became the one who handled things, the one who showed up, the one who remembered doctor appointments and drove people places and sat with my brother until midnight, helping him study for the class he was failing while my parents focused their energy on not panicking about his scholarship. I was the one Ryan called when he got in a fender bender at 19 and needed someone to pick up his car from the impound lot because he was too embarrassed to call our parents. I showed up every time without being asked. I thought that was love. I thought that's what family meant. You show up, they love you, and someday, when you need it, they show up too. I spent a long time waiting for someday. I want to be really specific about when things started to shift for me because it wasn't one big thing. It was small things, accumulating. The way water gets into a wall, slowly, invisibly, until one day the whole structure is compromised and you didn't even see it happening. Here's a small thing. When I was 12, I was struggling in math, and I asked my dad for help with homework. He said, and I quote, "You're smart enough, figure it out." Then he went back to what he was doing. 2 years later, Ryan got a C in that same math class. My dad hired a private tutor, drove him to every session. I know. Kids are different. Parents respond differently. I'm not saying my dad was evil. I'm saying that was a data point. And I collected data points the way some kids collect rocks or stamps or whatever. Quietly, carefully, not knowing yet what they were for. My younger sister Dana was 7 years younger than me, which means she basically grew up in a different family. By the time she hit high school, the pressure was off. Ryan's story had already been written. My role had already been established. Dana got to just be a kid. Scattered, funny, a little chaotic, and my parents thought it was charming. When I was scattered, I was irresponsible. When Dana was scattered, she was just Dana. I left for college on a partial scholarship I applied for myself. Ryan's tuition was paid without discussion. I didn't make a big deal of it. I just noted it and filed it away with the other things I was noting and filing. I graduated, got a job, moved 2 hours away, started building a life, and I kept showing up. Holidays, birthdays, family dinners where my dad and Ryan talked about Ryan's career for an hour, and I sat there and smiled and drove home and cleaned my apartment because cleaning is what I do when I need to feel in control of something. I kept showing up because I genuinely believed, that underneath all of it, my family loved me, that they were just bad at showing it, that if I kept being present, kept being available, kept being the one who held things together, eventually they would look up and see me standing there, and something in them would recognize what they had. My 32nd birthday cured me of that belief. March 14th. It's not an obscure date. It's in my phone's contact info. It's been on the family calendar for 32 years. Nobody called. Not my mom, not my dad. Not Ryan, who I had driven 40 minutes to help move into his new apartment 6 weeks earlier. Not Dana. Not a single person in my family picked up the phone on my birthday. The only acknowledgement I got was an automated text from my dentist reminding me my cleaning was overdue. I sat in my apartment that night with takeout I'd ordered for myself, and I thought I could disappear and no one would notice. And I want to be clear, I meant that as a dramatic thought, the kind you think in a dark moment and don't actually believe. But the more I sat there in the quiet, the more I wasn't sure it was dramatic. I wasn't sure it was wrong. So I decided to find out. I'm going to tell you what I did, and I want you to understand why I did it. This was not a manipulation. This was not a plan to punish anyone. This was an experiment. A clean, honest, controlled experiment with one variable and one question. The question was, is my family's connection to me real, or is it entirely maintained by my own effort? The variable was me, specifically my effort. I found an apartment in a new city, 2 hours away. I signed the lease April 1st. Yes, April Fool's Day, which felt fitting in a way I couldn't have articulated at the time. I moved my things over 3 weekends in April and May, small loads, nothing dramatic. I forwarded my mail, updated my driver's license, changed my emergency contact at work to my college roommate, and I stopped initiating. That's all I did. I stopped being the one who called first, the one who texted to check in, the one who kept the group chat alive, the one who said, "It's been a while and how are you doing?" and "I heard you had a rough week. Are you okay?" I just stopped and I waited to see what would happen on the other side. Week 1, nothing. Expected. Week 2, nothing. Still expected. Week 3, Ryan posted a meme in the family group chat. People reacted with laughing emojis. I was in the chat. I had not responded to anything in 3 weeks. No one said anything about it. Week 4, my mom sent a mass text reminding the family about Aunt Carol's birthday. It was addressed to everyone. I didn't respond. Nothing happened. 1 month in. Not a single direct contact from any member of my immediate family, and I want you to feel that for a second. Not to feel sorry for me. I'm past needing that. But just to feel the actual math of it. 1 month. People who supposedly loved me. 0 attempts at contact. Month 2, I finished moving. The apartment was mine now. Fully, officially, completely. 1 bedroom, high ceilings, drafty windows I covered with heavy curtains, a kitchen with good light in the mornings, a windowsill where I would eventually put a plant and then be irrationally proud when I kept it alive. My family had no idea this place existed. Month 3, my mom called. I answered with my heart beating a little faster because I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe she noticed. She needed my grandmother's lemon cake recipe for a church potluck. I gave her the recipe. She said, "Thank you, honey." She hung up. She did not ask how I was. She did not ask where I was. She did not notice anything unusual. The call was 53 seconds long. I know it was 53 seconds because I timed it. Month 4 was the hardest month. I want to be honest about that because this story could make me sound like I was doing this whole thing with detached scientific clarity, and that is not the truth. Month 4, the silence stopped being data and started being grief. Because here's the thing about running an experiment like this. You might go in thinking you know the answer, but the moment the data actually confirms what you suspected, it hits different. It stops being a hypothesis and becomes a fact. A real, ugly, unavoidable fact. My family didn't think about me, not in the way I thought about them, not with curiosity or longing or the specific worry you feel for someone you love. They didn't wonder where I was or what I was doing or whether I was okay. I existed in their lives as a function, a reliable, available function that could be called upon when needed, and in the absence of a specific need, I simply didn't register. I wasn't a person to them. I was a standing appointment they only thought about when they needed to schedule something. I called my therapist more in month 4 than in the entire previous year. She didn't tell me to stop. She said, "You're finding out whether the relationship is real or maintained. That's a legitimate thing to want to know." And then she said, "Be prepared for the answer to be painful." She was right on both counts. Month 5, Ryan got engaged. He and his girlfriend Melissa posted the photos on Instagram. Waterfall backdrop, the ring catching the light, both of them grinning. The family group chat went insane. My mom sent 17 messages in a row. My dad, who texted maybe twice a year, sent a string of celebratory emojis. Dana called Ryan immediately. I liked the photo from my account, which they all follow. No one reached out to me. Not to say, "Did you see?" Not to say, "Isn't this exciting?" Not to say, "When are you coming home to celebrate?" I existed in that moment as a small heart icon on a photo, and even that went unacknowledged. Month 6, something my therapist said started settling in. She'd used a word I kept coming back to, ambient. She said I had made myself ambient in my family's life, not invisible, ambient, like background noise, like the hum of a refrigerator, something so consistently present that it stopped registering as a separate thing and just became part of the environment. You only notice ambient noise when it stops. 10 months later, they still hadn't noticed it stopped. Month 7, my dad called. I answered. He needed the password to a streaming service I shared with my parents. My account, my subscription. It had auto-reset after a security update, and he couldn't log in. I gave him the new password. "Got it, thanks." He hung up. I changed the password again after. Month 8, I started building things. Real things. A Saturday morning coffee routine at a place 2 blocks away, run by a woman named Irene, who remembered my order by week 3 and asked about my life like she meant it. A hiking trail I found by accident that I started doing every Sunday, watching the seasons shift on the same path each week. A retired neighbor named Paul who fed birds in the courtyard and talked to me about his grandchildren whenever we ran into each other, and actually listened when I talked back. Small things, ordinary things, but they were mine, chosen by me, built by me, existing entirely outside of any structure that required me to perform or prove or be useful. And I noticed something I hadn't expected. The less energy I spent managing relationships that didn't reciprocate, the more I had for everything else. I started cooking real dinners on weeknights because I discovered I actually liked cooking when I wasn't doing it for anyone's approval. I started drawing again, something I'd quit in high school when it became clear my parents' investment was in Ryan's athletics, and not in whatever I was quietly making in my room. I filled a sketchbook by month 9. I started to feel, for the first time in a long time, like a person with an interior life. Month 9. The wedding planning started showing up on Instagram. Melissa posted bridesmaid dresses. Ryan reposted with almost time. My mom commented. Dana left heart emojis. I was not a bridesmaid. I hadn't expected to be. Ryan and I had been close in the specific way where one person does all the emotional labor, and the other person accepts it without tracking it. Now that the labor had stopped, we were apparently strangers. The absence still landed somewhere. I'm not going to pretend it didn't. Month 10 was a Tuesday, early May. I had just gotten home from work. I was in the kitchen, mid-dish, good light coming through the window, plant on the sill doing exactly what plants do. My phone rang. Dad. I let it ring through. Missed call. Then again. Missed call. Then again. On the third call, I picked up because some reflex in me, 32 years of being the one who answers, wouldn't wouldn't let me not. Hey, you need to be here Friday. Ryan's rehearsal dinner, and we're doing family photos that afternoon. No hello, no how are you, just instructions. I turned off the faucet, set down the dish, looked around my kitchen that he had never seen and didn't know existed. That's a strange way to invite someone. It's family. You don't need an invitation. Interesting, I said, because it's been 10 months, Dad. Pause. What's that supposed to mean? It means I moved last April. New city, new apartment, and in 10 months, nobody in this family called me for any reason other than a recipe and a streaming password. Longer pause. Then the pivot. The move I had watched him make my entire life when a conversation started going somewhere he didn't control. I don't know what you're making this into, but we need you here. Your mother already told people you're coming. The photos need to look complete. And there it was. Not, I miss you. Not, we want you there. Not even, your brother wants you there. The photos need to look complete. I had been reduced to a gap in a frame, a missing figure that would create awkward questions if absent. My presence was required not because anyone loved me, but because the story my family told about itself, close, complete, together, needed all its pieces in the shot. I was a piece. I was a prop. No, I said. The silence that followed was different from 10 months of silence. This one was disbelieving. Excuse me? I'm not coming. The voice shifted, low and controlled. The register he'd used my whole childhood to signal that consequences were on the table. Claire, this is your brother's wedding. You don't get to decide you're not coming. I just did. If you embarrass this family, if you pull this because of some grudge you're nursing, I will remove you from my will. I'm serious. Every penny. He was serious. I knew that. The will was real, and the threat was real, and there was a version of me, the version that existed before 10 months in an apartment he'd never visited, who would have backed down, who would have calculated the cost, weighed the inheritance, and swallowed whatever she needed to swallow, and gotten in the car on Friday. But that version of me had run the experiment, and the experiment had results. I waited for him to finish. Then I said, you'd have to know where I live to disinherit me. 3 seconds. I counted them. 1, 2, 3, nothing. Just breathing. And the particular quality of silence that comes after someone realizes, for the first time, that the map they've been using doesn't match the territory. He didn't know where I lived. He didn't have my address. He didn't know my city or my street or my zip code. He could not have shown up, could not have mailed anything, could not have done a single thing that disinheriting someone actually requires in practical terms, because he had never asked where I was. His daughter, the one who drove to every crisis, who showed up without being called, who held things together for 32 years, had been living somewhere else for 10 months, and he had never once wondered where. He hung up first. I stood in my kitchen for a long time after that, the dishes half done, the plant catching light. Paul probably out in the courtyard right now with his birds. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I was still. The specific kind of stillness that comes when you've been bracing for something for years, and it finally happens and your body realizes it can let go. My phone buzzed. Text from my mom. Dad said you can't make it to the wedding. We're very disappointed. Please reconsider. Can't make it. Not won't. Can't. Like I had a scheduling conflict. Like what had just happened was a calendar issue, and not 32 years of being invisible finally having a name. I set the phone face down and went to bed. Here's where I thought the story ended. I was wrong. 3 days after the phone call, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Hey, it's Melissa. Ryan's Melissa. I got your number from Dana. I hope that's okay. Can we talk? I stared at it for a long time. Melissa, my brother's fiance, who I had met exactly 4 times, who had, at Ryan's engagement party, a party I drove 3 hours to attend back when I was still showing up, asked me careful, genuine questions about my life and actually waited for the answers, who had seemed in those 4 meetings like someone who paid attention. I texted back, sure, call whenever. She called that night. I want to be straight with you, she said, which was already more than most people in my family had managed. Ryan told me what happened with your dad, or he told me his version, and then I talked to Dana, and I kind of want to hear yours. I wasn't sure what to do with that. Why? I asked. Because I'm about to marry into this family, she said, and I've been watching how this family works for 2 years, and I have some questions. We talked for 2 hours. She asked me about growing up, about Ryan specifically, what our relationship was actually like, beneath the surface level we're close version Ryan had apparently given her. I told her about the impound lot, about the midnight study sessions, about the birthday, about 10 months of silence and 1 phone call about a recipe and 1 about a password, and then a demand about photos. She listened to all of it. She didn't interrupt. She didn't rush to defend Ryan. She just listened. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said something I hadn't expected. He doesn't know, she said. I don't mean that as an excuse. I mean it as something I've been trying to figure out how to tell him. Ryan genuinely doesn't have a map for what he's taken from you. He thinks you're close. He thinks you're fine. He has no idea there's a ledger. That's kind of the problem, I said. Yeah, she said. I know. Then she said, I need to ask you something and you don't have to answer. But would you want to, eventually, talk to him? Not for the wedding. I'm not calling to recruit you back for the photos. I'm asking because I think Ryan needs to understand some things, and I don't know if he'll hear it from me the same way he'd hear it from you. I sat with that question for a long time. I don't know, I said finally. Not yet. That's fair, she said. She didn't push. She didn't guilt me. She didn't say, think about what this is doing to the family. She just said that was fair and asked if it was okay if she checked in sometime, just to see how I was doing. Not to update me on wedding logistics, logistics, just to see how I was doing. I said yes. The wedding happened without me. I know because the photos went up on Instagram that Saturday. Ryan and Melissa at the altar, my parents in the front row, Dana in a lilac dress I'd never seen, everyone arranged in the frame my father had needed to be complete. A cousin I'd met twice at family reunions was standing where I might have stood. She was smiling. The photos looked fine. The photos always looked fine. That was never actually the problem. What happened next, I did not see coming. 2 weeks after the wedding, my dad called again. I almost didn't answer, but I did. The reflex is a stubborn thing. Hey, I said. Silence for a second. And then, and this is the part I've turned over more times than anything else. He said, I don't have your address. That's it. That's all he said. Just that. In a voice that was stripped of the tone I was used to. The controlling register was gone. The certainty was gone. He just said it like a man reading a fact from a page in front of him. Like he was reporting something that had been true for a long time, and he'd only just looked at it. I didn't say anything. Melissa said some things, he continued. After the wedding, she said some things that I've been sitting with. Still didn't say anything. I was waiting to see what he'd actually do with the silence, since in my experience, he usually filled it with something self-protective. He didn't fill it. He let it sit. I don't have your address, he said again, and I've been trying to figure out when I stopped having it, and I can't. I can't figure out when that happened, which means I don't think I ever had it, which means he stopped. I heard him take a breath. I don't know where you live, he said, and I don't know a lot of things, and I don't know how to fix that, but I wanted to call and say that I know it, that it's true. I know it's true. It was the most my father had ever said without trying to control what the words did to the room. It was not an apology. I want to be clear about that. He did not say sorry. He did not say he understood what those 10 months had cost me, or name the birthday, or the recipe call, or the password call, or any of it. He said he knew something was wrong and he didn't know how to fix it. From my father, that was not nothing. I don't know what comes next. I want to be honest about that because I think there's an expectation with stories like this that they resolve cleanly, that there's a conversation where everyone says the true thing and someone cries and something is repaired. I don't know if that's coming. I don't know if my dad is capable of the kind of sustained self-examination that would be required. I don't know if Ryan will ever understand the ledger I've been keeping or if understanding it would even change anything. I don't know if my family can become something different than what they've always been. What I know is this. Melissa texts me on random Tuesdays to see how I'm doing, not with an agenda, just checking in. She's going to be a sister-in-law who I might actually like, which is something I did not see coming and would not have discovered if I'd kept showing up as the prop in the family's photo. My dad doesn't have my address yet. I haven't given it to him. Maybe I will. Maybe when I'm ready. Maybe when the evidence suggests it would mean something different than it would have meant before all of this. But that's my decision to make, on my timeline, for the first time in my life. My plant is still alive, 4 months now. New leaf coming in on the left side. Irene at the coffee shop knows my order and asks about my week, and the question is real. Paul in the courtyard told me last Sunday that I seemed lighter than when I moved in. Like you put something down, he said. Whatever you put down, leave it. I don't know what a million people are supposed to do with this story, but here's what I want you to take from it. If you are the one who always calls first, stop. Not forever, not as a punishment. Just stop and see what happens. See who notices. See who reaches for you when you stop reaching for them. See what's real and what was only ever maintained by your own effort. The answer might be painful, but it will be true. And true, I have learned, is worth more than comfortable. True is worth more than a frame that looks complete from the outside. True is the only ground that actually holds you when everything else shifts. My family didn't notice I was gone for 10 months. I noticed. I noticed everything. And now I'm building a life for the person who noticed. That person deserves it. And so, by the way, let me tell you what I've learned about the people who always show up. Not the people who show up when it's convenient. Not the people who show up when there's something in it for them, when there's social credit involved, when missing it would be noticed. I mean the people who show up when it's inconvenient, when nobody's keeping score, when the only reason they're there is that someone needs something, and they are constitutionally unable to be the person who doesn't answer. Those people learn something early. Reliability is invisible. When you're reliable, truly, consistently, show up without being asked reliable, you stop being a person people appreciate and start being something they factor into their plans without thinking about. You become infrastructure. You become the bridge everyone drives over without once considering what it took to build it or what happens if it collapses. I was infrastructure for my entire family for 32 years. And like all infrastructure, nobody thought about me until they needed to cross something. I want to tell you about a specific memory because I think it says something that's hard to say directly. Christmas, I was 29. I had driven 3 hours in a snowstorm to be home because my mom had mentioned, in passing, 2 weeks earlier that she hoped the whole family would be there this year. I had rearranged a work schedule. I had bought and wrapped presents for everyone. I had made the side dishes I always made because at some point it had become my thing, and now it was just expected without acknowledgement. I got there and helped set up, helped with the kids. Dana had a boyfriend with 2 little ones at that point, helped in the kitchen, kept the conversation moving when it lulled, mediated the moment my dad and Ryan started getting tense over something about sports or money or both. After dinner, when everyone was sitting around the living room in that full, slow way you sit after a big meal, my mom looked around the room and said, "This is so nice. I love when everyone's here." And then she turned to Ryan and said, said, "Did you get a chance to look at those investment options I sent you?" And Ryan started talking about the investment options. Nobody looked at me. Not that it was a moment that required anyone to look at me. Not that I needed applause for showing up. I know that. I'm not saying I wanted a speech. I'm saying that in a room where my absence would have required someone to make the side dishes and mediate the tension and keep the conversation alive and manage the small children, in a room where my presence was doing active, necessary work, I was furniture. The couch was also there. Nobody looked at the couch. I drove 3 hours home that night in the dark. The snow had stopped. The roads were clear and empty, and I drove with the radio off because I didn't want noise. I wanted to hear what I was thinking. What I was thinking was, I am really tired. Not sleepy tired. Tired in the way that you get when you've been giving something and giving it and giving it, and the giving has become so habitual and the receiving so absent that you can't even remember anymore what you were giving it for, what the point was, what you thought was going to happen eventually that hasn't happened and maybe isn't going to. I drove home and I cleaned my apartment because that's what I do. And then I went to bed and I didn't let myself think about it. That's what I did for a long time. I wouldn't let myself think about it. Because the moment you start thinking about it clearly, really clearly, without the protective fog of family is complicated and they love me, they just show it differently, you have to deal with what you see. And what you see might be something you can't unsee. I wasn't ready to unsee it yet, so I kept not thinking about it. And then my birthday came and the dentist texted and I let myself think about it. And once I let myself, I couldn't stop. The thing about running this kind of experiment, disappearing from people who love you to find out how much they love you, is that it's not a comfortable position to be in. There's a part of you, even when you believe in what you're doing, that feels like maybe you're the problem. Maybe you're asking for something unreasonable. Maybe loving someone doesn't mean you track their whereabouts and check in constantly and remember their birthday without prompting, and the bar you're holding people to is too high. I argued with myself about this constantly in the first 3 months. I would think, they're busy. I would think, they assume I'm fine. I would think, I never told them how much the not calling was affecting me, so how could they know? I would think, the group chat is still there. I'm still included in it. That counts for something. And then I would sit with that for a while, and eventually I'd come back to the same place. The group chat isn't connection. Being included in a mass text isn't the same as being thought of. Proximity isn't the same as presence. Going through the motions of having a family isn't the same as your family having you. I wasn't asking them to be perfect. I was asking them to notice I existed, and they didn't. For 10 months, they didn't. Here's something nobody tells you about becoming invisible in your own family. It changes the way you move through the world, not dramatically, slowly. The way your posture changes after years of carrying something heavy, you don't notice it until someone points it out or until you put the thing down and feel the absence of the weight and realize how long you've been compensating. By month 5, I was walking differently. Not literally, metaphorically. I was making decisions without checking what they cost the family narrative. I was declining things I didn't want to do without the usual mental calculation about whether the decline would require too much explanation or create too much friction. I was ordering what I actually wanted at restaurants. I was going to sleep at the time I wanted to go to sleep. I was spending weekends on the hiking trail instead of in a car driving to someone else's event. None of these are big things, but they add up to something. They add up to a person. A person with preferences and rhythms and a life that is organized around what she actually wants, rather than around the negative space of what other people need from her. I had spent so many years filling the negative space that I had, at some point, stopped noticing I was doing it. It had become my shape. I was the shape of the empty places in other people's lives. The experiment gave me a different shape. Month 8. This is important. I want to come back to month 8 because something happened that I almost didn't include in this story, and I've decided that's exactly why I need to include it. Month 8, I found an old journal from when I was 16. I used to journal constantly as a teenager, filled notebooks. It was the one place I was allowed to be fully honest without managing anyone's reaction to the honesty. And so I wrote everything in there, the real version of events, the real version of how I felt, the real version of what I was observing about my family from the inside. I hadn't opened one of those journals in 15 years. The one I found was from junior year of high school. I opened it to a random page and read a paragraph I had written at 16 years old that stopped me cold. I had written, I keep thinking about what it would be like if I just left. Not ran away, not dramatically, just left quietly and waited to see how long it took for anyone to notice. I feel like the answer would be really embarrassing and I don't want to know it. 16 years old. I had already intuited the experiment. I had already sensed the answer and had protected myself from knowing it for 16 more years. I sat on my apartment floor for a long time holding that journal. I thought about 16-year-old me, sitting at a desk somewhere in my parents' house, writing that sentence and then closing the notebook because the hypothesis was too painful to test. I thought about all the years between that sentence and March 14th, the birthday and the dentist text and the April lease. All the years of not testing it because knowing felt more dangerous than not knowing. And I thought, you should have tested it sooner. You deserve to know sooner. But you know now. And that's what matters. I also want to talk about Ryan, because he's the complicated one in this story, and I've been somewhat unfair to him by making him a supporting character in my own experience without giving you the full picture. Ryan is not a bad person. I want to say that clearly. He is not malicious. He never sat down and decided to take me for granted. He never looked at me and thought, she'll show up whether I deserve it or not, so why why bother? I don't think he thought about it at all. That's the thing about people who've never had to work for a relationship. They don't develop the muscle for it. When connection has always been there, you don't learn how to reach for it. You just assume it. Ryan assumed me. For 32 years, he assumed me, and I let him because I thought that was what love required. Absorption, patience, showing up regardless. What Melissa said to me, that Ryan doesn't have a map for what he's taken from me, I believe her. And I believe she's right that he genuinely thinks we're close. He has evidence. Every time he called, I showed up. Every time he needed something, I was there. From his vantage point, that's closeness. From my vantage point, that's a one-way road he's been driving down his whole life without knowing it went in only one direction. The voicemail he left after the wedding was, in its way, an attempt. I kind of get it, he said, which is the most Ryan has ever admitted to getting anything. He's not a person who says, I kind of get it easily. I haven't called back yet. I'm sitting with whether I want to. Not out of punishment, I've said that, but I want to say it again because I mean it. I'm not trying to make Ryan suffer. I'm trying to figure out what a real relationship with my brother would actually look like. Now that I'm not filling the negative space anymore, now that I'm not the one who shows up automatically, who absorbs things, who does the labor, is there something there without all that scaffolding? Is there a version of Ryan in me that doesn't require me to be useful? I don't know. I hope so. That's as honest as I can be. And my dad, his call, 2 weeks after the wedding. I don't have your address. I've thought about why he called. I've thought about it a lot because my dad is not a man who calls without a purpose. He calls when he needs something. He calls when he has instructions to deliver. He does not, as a rule, call to report uncomfortable realizations about himself, but he did. He called to say he knew something, to say a fact out loud. I think Melissa got to him in a way that bypassed his defenses. She's sharp, Melissa, and she loves Ryan enough to be honest with the people around him about what she sees. She walked into my family and looked at it with fresh eyes, and what she saw concerned her enough to have a 2-hour phone call with a sister-in-law she barely knows, and then, apparently, a conversation with my father that left him calling to report facts about himself. He doesn't have my address, he doesn't know where I am, and he's sitting with that. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I don't know if the thing my dad is doing, sitting with it, reporting it, letting it be a fact he holds rather than deflecting it, is sustainable. I don't know if it leads anywhere. I don't know if he has the capacity for the kind of change that would make giving him my address mean something different than it would have meant before. But for the first time in my life, the question of whether to trust my father is a question I'm actually allowed to weigh. For the first time, I have enough distance, and enough information, and enough of a life that doesn't depend on his approval to decide on my own terms whether I want to take a step toward him. That's new. That's a power I have never had before. And I want to be clear about something. The power didn't come from the phone call. It didn't come from the one sentence that made him go silent. It came from 10 months in an apartment he didn't know about. It came from the hiking trail, and Irene at the coffee shop, and Paul in the courtyard, and Bex texting me research papers and a sketchbook I filled back up and a plant that grew a new leaf. It came from building something. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about setting down the weight you've been carrying. You have to build something in the space where the weight was, or you'll just pick it back up again because the absence feels wrong. I built something. I built a small, specific, real life in a city that nobody knew I lived in, and I built it for nobody but myself. And because I built it, because I have it now, have it fully, in a way I have never had anything before, I don't need my family's approval to feel like a person. I feel like a person already. That's the whole thing. That's all I was ever trying to feel. So, if you are the one who always shows up, if you are the infrastructure, if you are the one who does the labor that everyone else benefits from and nobody names, I want to say something directly to you. You are allowed to put it down. Not as punishment, not as manipulation, not to prove a point or win an argument or make someone feel what you felt. Just because you're tired and you've been carrying it for a long time and you deserve to know what it feels like to not carry it, you are allowed to stop calling first. You are allowed to build a life that isn't organized around the negative space of other people's needs. You are allowed to find out who you are when nobody needs anything from you. It might be uncomfortable. It probably will be. The answer you get might not be the one you were hoping for, but it will be true, and you will know. And knowing, even when it hurts, is better than the specific exhaustion of being someone who suspects something painful and spends years not letting themselves find out. You deserve to know. You deserve to put it down. You deserve the plant on the windowsill and the coffee order that someone remembers and the hiking trail on Sunday mornings and the neighbor who asks about your week and waits for the answer. You deserve to be a person, not a function. Go find out who that person is. She's been waiting a long time. She really has.